If you've been watching this channel at all, or if you even pay attention when you watch, my studio, Oak House Recording, is in the Altadena area of Los Angeles, which means that I am in the middle of this whole fire drama. And obviously I'm talking to you from the studio, so that is very good news for us. That's why I say we're some of the lucky ones, because the studio and the home survived, where many others were not so lucky, obviously. So because I'm in Altadena, I have no power, there's no gas, the water is not safe to use, so that's why it's all dark in here. That's why I'm talking to you from the dark. It's cold, so I'm all bundled up here in a few layers of things. It's California cold. It's not Minnesota cold, right? It's 45 degrees outside tonight. And because there's no services here, there's not much to do here in the evening. So I thought with my little battery backup I have here, I would turn on the camera, turn on a light, and just tell the story from our eyes of the Altadena EATON fire. Now, as I tell the story, the very first thing I have to acknowledge is that, you know, my story is not, by any stretch of the imagination, the most dramatic, interesting, sad story in this whole event. Like I said, I'm one of the lucky ones. The whole thing, all things considered, was very polite to us here in this household. So in no way is this video sought to say that I'm a victim of any of this, or I'm not looking for sympathy or anything like that. I just thought it was a timely topic. I wanted to share what it was like here on the ground as it all unfolded. I want to talk about watching it begin, because it literally started right up a couple blocks up from me, and I watched the whole thing kind of begin. I want to talk about things that I noticed along the way that really surprised me. These are things that, you know, I'm a smart enough guy. I watch all this stuff on TV. You kind of think you know what a disaster is like, but then things happen and you get surprised. So I'm going to talk about some of that. I want to talk about, you know, when I had to evacuate the studio, what did I take? You know, that was surprising to me, what I took and what I didn't take, and my attitude toward the whole thing. And then I just kind of want to share a little bit about what I've learned about situations like these in the big picture, because I feel like I learned a lot. And I think it's worth sharing, it's worth talking about. Again, people have much deeper, harder stories and much deeper lessons learned to share. I'm sure a lot of those videos are going to be forthcoming as they land on their feet. So again, in no way am I trying to claim this story as my own, but I just want to share it from my perspective. So the first thing I want to say is obviously the house, the studio survived. There are lots of studios up here in Altadena. Altadena is filled with a whole bunch of musicians, especially like musicians with young families like me, like middle-aged dads with studios and kids. You know, like the dad is like working class studio guys, musicians, session players. All those folks are up here. Lots of creatives up in Altadena. Altadena is a little community that's kind of attached to Pasadena. Some people just think of it as North Pasadena, but it's its own thing. And it really is this kind of charming, out-of-the-way place that no one in LA ever thinks about. But it's kind of woodsy, lots of trees up by the mountains. It's kind of isolated. It has like there's lots of people with chickens up here and horses. And it's not LA or Pasadena City, so the building codes were county and they were a little looser, so there's some really weird, interesting houses up here, a lot of history up here, some interesting landmarks, and it's just a really great little community that's really started to really bloom, especially over the last few years. But a lot of it, as of today, is just gone. And when I mean gone, I mean gone. If you look at a fire map of where the Altadena lines are, and I'll add it here, and where the burn area is, you'll see that it's 75% of it has been burned. Now that doesn't mean 75% of everything is lost. Maybe it's 50-50, because not every house in the burn areas is gone. And then there are little bubbles of like safe places, like where I am, There's fire to my left, there's fire to my right, there's fire up the hill, but I am in this like little bubble that kind of was spared, but go 2 blocks one way, 2 blocks the other way, and it's not, okay? So this place has really just absolutely been decimated, and not just the neighborhoods, not just the houses, but the stores, the churches. I think even a fire station was lost, the schools. Our bunny museum, we had this museum of this married couple who had like collected 40,000 bunny trinkets, and that's all gone. So much of what made this place is just a pile of ashes right now, and it is an intense experience. And for me, it feels intense for me, but it's 100th for me, or 1,000th for me, what it is for most of the other people in this city. So first of all, I am not a victim. I'm one of the lucky ones. I don't want to claim the story for myself. I just want to tell it from my perspective. I just really want to get that out of the way. So, as lucky as we are here in this house, we do have lots of family and friends that lost houses. So, my wife's brother's house was lost. And we were just there last week for New Year's Eve, celebrating the house and the new life and nice things to come. And now it is literally ashes in a chimney. It's very apparent now that the Eaton fire was started by a power line. They haven't announced that officially yet, but video has come out today of someone just a couple blocks up filming into the canyon. So we have all these neighborhoods. There's like a couple blocks of neighborhoods, and there's a line where the mountain starts. And right at that mountain is Eaton Canyon National Wildlife Area. That's why they call it the Eaton Fire. And it's just like hiking trails. You can walk up the mountain, or you can go back and see a little waterfall. It's gorgeous. It's amazing. But there are also these really big power transmission lines that come down over Eaton Canyon. And there's video of the fire just blazing in a little fashion just right under this one transmission tower. I'm sure a transformer blew, or some line sparked from the winds. And now I just saw a newspaper article that said that tower is under investigation. So we evacuated that night because it kind of started around 6:30 in the evening. It actually started right up the street from my house and the studio. I was sitting here, the winds were blowing. We've got these 40-mile-an-hour constant winds, 70, 80-mile-an-hour gusts at that time. I mean, it was really intense, crazy winds. And then all of a sudden you hear a helicopter, and you think, there's no helicopter when things are like this. What's going on? So I walked outside, and the sky is aglow with orange, and you know what's going on because you live in California. This is right outside my door right now. This is right up at the top of our street. Fire just started. I've been in this particular house for about 15 years. This is probably our 3rd or 4th major fire right up on the hill right here. So this is kind of a normal thing. So you know what's happening, but you also know when these winds are kicking that is a completely unpredictable situation, so you know it's time to leave. Okay, this is escalating rapidly. I don't know if you can tell, but there are flames right there up on the hill. It still looks like it's up on the hill, but man, I don't know if that's the hill or if that's a tree a block away. I can't tell. But we're ready to roll. So as soon as I saw that, I ran back to tell family. The family was getting phone calls. They were running up to tell me. And so we just started getting out of here. I got my wife and kids packed up and out. And then they got out real fast. It didn't look like the fire was coming down the hill at that moment. It looked like it was going up the mountain. And so I thought, oh, okay, the firefighters have stopped it at the top of the neighborhoods. It's moving up into the wilderness like it usually does. We're probably going to be fine. I'm going to hang tight for a few minutes and do a more planned exit of the house. So we got the wife and kids out to safety. I was here. My mother was in the house with me. And so I started looking at the studio and what I could, get out, stuff like that, kind of planning our escape. Okay, we've officially lost power. You can definitely see flames up on the hill. They kind of come and go with the smoke. It looks small at the moment, but as soon as the smoke clears, it'll look huge again. And it's all the way over here now too, so it's definitely spread to the east. We have big plumes kind of blowing over us. We stayed here for another few hours. It looked like the fire was spreading up into the mountain and then off to the east and the west. It's hard to tell whether they're just in the trees or whether they're on the mountain. It looks like the mountain because of the angle of the flame lines. Looks like it's going up the hill. If it's on the mountain, probably in good shape. And I was hopeful. At that time, you know, it was dramatic and scary, but you didn't believe it was going to be horrible yet. So there's a part of you that thought, maybe this will be like a big dramatic adventure. I mean, no one's happy there's a fire and winds, but you thought maybe it won't be a horrible thing. So your adrenaline's going, you start packing up stuff. So my mom and I stayed for a couple hours. We pulled the car up to the front of the driveway just to be ready to go in a second. And I started going through the process of picking out what I would take. At that moment, what it looked like was, okay, I don't think I have much time to take a lot. And a lot of the studio stuff, I can't take the console. I can't take the analog tape deck. I can't unwire the patch base. So what's going to happen? So my first thought was grab what's quick. And that was the microphones. Microphones went first. I grabbed anything that was, you know, kind of pricier, irreplaceable, the old tube Neumann stuff. I have a custom made kind of 47-ish mic that actually I like better than all my tube Neumann stuff, which is surprising. I grabbed that and I put it in the car. I didn't even bother with power supplies or anything, just the mics themselves. I was looking around, what else is fast? A couple guitars. There's probably 8 or 9 guitars in this studio. I picked some really strange choices. I picked a guitar I just listed for sale, which was weird, but it was worth something. So I thought, okay, I'll sell it. If I lose everything, at least I'll be able to pay for a hotel room for a month or something. And I went back into my bedroom and I grabbed my mom's old Yamaha nylon string off my bedroom wall because it was the first guitar I ever played a chord on in my life. I had another guitar here that had been my main acoustic guitar for like 30 years that I toured with and taken with me around wherever I was living, different places around the world, and that I've used in all my albums. And for some reason, that one I felt very comfortable letting go of. But my mom's little nylon string, maybe because I had started writing songs again and they were all being written on that guitar. So I was kind of mid-process on that guitar. And I wanted to take that one most of all. So then it was that, and then I was looking at all the racks. I'm thinking, oh my God, there are Pultecs here. I've got preamps here. And I grabbed, the only other thing I grabbed was the 175B. I didn't pay a crazy amount for it, but when I got it, I thought, I've arrived. I don't know, for some reason that piece of gear told me that I was at a new level of my gear acquisition. I got a lucky buy on it, and it had some weird sentimental value to me that just, I don't know, made me feel good about where I was at. I started to pull some things out of the racks, but you quickly realize in a rack like mine, when everything is kind of against the wall, is that, you know, you can start pulling out of the rack, but then the power connection goes down behind the wall. And if you want to unplug the power, you got to take 5 other things out of the racks, and that just wasn't going to happen. I started pulling my custom Altex, the RS-124 conversions out because I thought I probably can't get those made again. But I gave up as soon as I realized where the power connections were. I was going to pull the Pultecs out, same thing. I thought about pulling the Magic Death Eye out because I could have got that one out, but I thought, and I use it, every mix runs through it, every vocal runs through it. It's just a very universally used thing now that I have it. But even that, I just let go of, and I was watching myself go through this process where I've spent 30 years collecting this stuff, curating the collection, buying, selling, sacrificing, having a crappy car so I can get a new microphone, you know, having only 3 pairs of pants so I can get another guitar, you know, all the sacrifices. But when it came time, I was amazed at how little I cared about it. I was very at peace with leaving it behind. And I don't know why. And that is a kind of confusing thing. I know a lot of people up here who lost their whole studios. I know Rich Mauser lost his studio. I know that the band Dawes, you know, Taylor and Griffin Goldsmith, they lost. Griffin lost his house. Taylor lost the studio on his property, not the main house, but like lots of other stuff on his property. Their parents who lived up here too lost their house. So I know their whole like instrument collection they've been collecting for 20 years is gone. and all these other studios. So many, like I said, there's so many like people like me, like middle-aged music dads who have studios, and they're all gone. I've seen pictures of people with their amp and guitar collections sitting out on the street right in front of their burning home, because that's what they grabbed. They grabbed all their amps and their guitars. So I thought I would be that guy. I thought I would be out in the street with every single piece of gear I'd spent my life collecting. And the truth was, I just wasn't. I grabbed my mom's old cheap Yamaha. I grabbed a microphone I knew I could never replace. And the 175B, because it like told me something about where I was at in life, and this other guitar I was going to sell because I thought I could sell it for money. And that's all I cared about. And then I left. Okay, official last Peter's evac from the house. It's very smoky in here. And we've waited long enough. It's just going to keep getting smokier and less comfortable in this house, so we are going to go. When I left, we evacuated. We have family in the area further down into Pasadena. We went down there. I joined the rest of my family, and we just kind of sat there watching the news and talking about how dramatic it was, but we were still very positive and good spirits. Oh, it's going to be okay. It's scary, but it's going to be okay. We probably got like 2 hours of sleep, and then my brother-in-law was evacuated from his neighborhood. And when he came, he said, "It looks like it's close." And so then we were kind of a bit more alarmed. So we sat there up with them from like 4 in the morning on. As the sun came up around 7, we started kind of going out in teams to assess like what was really going on out there, because nobody really knew. We knew some stuff was on fire. They said it was in the neighborhoods, but we didn't know where. We kind of wanted to see, should we be protecting our houses? Are we in any danger? So I got a photo back that our house so far was safe. And then we got word that they could not get to my brother-in-law's house. There was too much smoke, too much fire. It was a raging inferno in that whole general area. So it looked really bad. So we were kind of distraught about that. Then as the sun kind of really came up, I decided, well, if my house is standing and these fires are burning into the neighborhoods, I'm going to go over there. Because if an ember lands on my roof, maybe I can spray it off. Maybe I can protect something. Maybe there's something I can do. So I came back over to the house and just kind of started standing guard over it. A few minutes later, I got word that my brother-in-law's house was probably lost. So I just sat here watching the skies. There was a bunch of stuff falling from the skies, a bunch of ash and stuff like that. But no real embers. And so because the winds were so bad, we had up to 99 mile an hour gusts, but even the 40 mile an hour winds with the 70 mile an hour gusts were doing enough. There's all kind of trees in this neighborhood. Limbs were falling. We had a big tree fall in the neighbor's yard that fell. The main trunk fell right next to my house, but huge branches fell on my house. So the house got smashed. It started shaking before we evacuated. It's another reason why we evacuated. It wasn't just the time and the flames, and it was mostly the smoke got so bad we just couldn't be in here. And then when the trees started falling and kind of smashing into the roof, we thought it's not a good place to be. So I was back, and I thought, okay, our whole property is completely covered in about 6 inches of branches, dry, dead branches and leaves. This is very bad. So we just started cleaning as fast as we could, trying to get stuff in the garbage bags and away from the house. Then before dark, I felt like the word on my brother-in-law's house. So I went over to go see that. So as I drove the streets, this is when reality really started to hit me personally. Because up to that point, we had heard structures had burned, but we don't know what that means. But his house is on the other side of town in northwest Altadena, and northwest Altadena just isn't there anymore. I mean, even as we drove, by the time we turned around just a block or two up here, you started seeing burned out houses. And what was really interesting about that is that it wasn't all the houses. It was like everything was normal. Then all of a sudden, just a house was missing. There was just a chimney and ashes and maybe some flame coming out of the ground. But then the house next to it would be fine. The house next to it would be fine. You're like, why did that house burn? So I think 3 in a row are just absolutely burnt. But then this one right next to it that's being built with all this raw wood didn't even get touched. There's no trail of fire coming in, so I assume it's from the embers floating down and kind of selectively landing on houses. But then as we got deeper and deeper into the neighborhood, you saw more and more houses missing, more and more houses missing. And by the time you got up to the top of the hill, it was just, the street was just 70%, 80% of everything was missing. The next thing I noticed is that as we drove through this flaming rubble, is that everything was still burning. I mean, it wasn't mid-inferno burn, but a lot of houses were still half on fire, and some of them were slowly starting to burn houses next to them. And there were no firefighters there. There were no police there. A lot of the people had evacuated, and there were all these what looked like could have been easy wins for a fire truck. A garden hose wouldn't have handled it, so it's not like you could have just pulled off the road and saved it, but a fire truck could have just done it in 10 minutes. But there were no fire trucks. There was nobody. They were busy. I'm not blaming the fire department. They were so overstretched and the winds were so wild that at that point, like, you'd just be spraying into the wind and it would just, dissipate. So, but it was really strange to see your whole neighborhood on fire and no authorities. That was a really crazy experience. But the thing you really noticed it were, you would hear explosions. Just not as often as popcorn, but you would just hear these explosions come up. And that's probably like propane tanks maybe on grills, things like that. Or you go to a gas station, they have all those propane tanks sitting out. You would just hear all these pops and explosions. Maybe cars, gas tanks and cars were probably blowing up. And so you just kept hearing these explosions, and it was crazy. There was even one moment where a gas station caught on fire and they weren't able to shut off the pumps. And so they had to clear a half-mile radius around this one gas station, because if the whole pump blew, the ground was going to erupt and it was just going to destroy everything out. So there was a safety barrier that they did put up around that. So they were focused on big threats like that. And so we got about halfway there and we hit what is Lake Avenue, which is a main kind of commercial thoroughfare north and south through Altadena. But that's the commercial district. And you hear about houses burning sometimes, but when we hit Altadena, or when we hit Lake, that's when you started seeing schools burning, churches burning, banks burning, grocery stores burning, fire stations, post offices burning. That was really something like, oh my God, this is very, very real, right? Because it's in the middle of the town. So there, on the other side of town, there were a few authorities blocking certain roads and stuff, but not very many. We drove around, we found a path to my brother-in-law's neighborhood, and I kind of knew I was in the general area. There were some street signs still standing, so I think I knew I was on his road, but I didn't know whether I was 5 blocks away or there. And so I'm sitting in the car, I get out of the car, I'm looking at my map to see where I am on the phone with the GPS, and I'm wondering where his house is, because there's nothing left. There are no houses left. Literally, you could see 3 blocks, there was nothing there. And then I looked down to the side and I saw this cobblestone wall, and I realized I'm at his house. I'm standing right in front of it, and I had no idea. And I'll put the video up here just to kind of share what the experience was. But there was a chimney, there were some metal support bars, and the flaming hulk of a car, and the burnt out trunk of an avocado tree. And that was it. And the property was still little flames on the property, downed power lines everywhere. There was no electricity in the system. Everything had been shut off by that point. And so many lines were down. It smelled horrible. You would have a couple of masks on trying to get through. It was a harrowing experience. And so I took a little video of it, and I called family, and I just verified it's true. We lost his house. So then our next choice was, well, what do we do next? And at that moment, I kind of realized that, because I drove over there and I didn't see very many police or firefighters. I knew they were there doing the best they could somewhere else. I saw people all over the streets. Already there was a little bit of news of looting, and I thought, my entire livelihood is in this room that I'm sitting in right now. If I lose this, I can't work. If I lose this, I can't help these people who are losing their homes. If I lose this, I have no power to help my brother-in-law. I'm going back to the studio and I'm going to protect it. So I came back. My wife and kids stayed away. I came back. I brought my mother. So we were here, and there was no power here, but that's fine. We hunkered down and we just kind of set up camp in the house, and made sure that the doors were locked, made sure we had a way to defend ourselves and protect ourselves, and just tried to make it apparent that we were here by putting our flashlights, whatever we had, kind of in the windows to make sure that anyone who would come would know. Because at that point, we didn't have any trust in the authorities. Not because the authorities are bad or untrustworthy, but because it just became very aware that they were stretched way too thin and they had way bigger things to worry about than us. And that's one of the big things I learned, is that there's lots of things that, because stuff usually goes right, we expect that it's just going to go right. And even when there's been fires up here in the past, we would expect them to go right. But once you see it all it's total lawlessness and chaos, you realize that no one's coming to save you. And so, so even if authority wants to help you, it can't always do it. It's got bigger fish to fry. So another thing that became really apparent through this whole experience is just how much the news kind of sucks. It's not that it's not trying to do its job. It's not that it's not trying to inform the public. It's just that it's kind of an outdated model. Every time I would turn on the news, it'd be like the camera would be pointing toward some flaming building, and they'd be dragging people off the street to ask them how they felt about it, or what they saw, but it was always in one place, and it would just hang there for a long time. Or after it was done and they were going up into the burn areas, they would just chase people as they discovered their houses were burnt down and try to milk all the feelings out of them to express on the camera. And it's not that stuff is bad, but it's just not helpful when you're in the middle of the emergency on the ground. So whenever we needed information, we did not turn to the news. We were texting people, we were asking neighbors, we were looking at local Facebook groups. People were posting on there minute by minute what was happening, what they were seeing. We were looking on X, we were looking on just different places. And that is where we actually got useful information that was actionable on the ground. And not just during the emergency itself, but even like later, as I'm sitting up here in the house, up here in these locked out zones, like where are the road closures? What's the National Guard doing? When's the electrical stuff coming up? What areas are off limits? What time's the curfew? I mean, I'm sure that the news would mention these things once or twice, but you'd have to go find it. There's no way to search it easily. If I went into YouTube or Google and would search something like Thursday fire update Altadena or road closures Altadena, like all it would do would give me like 30 different proper news things from like ABC or CBS from like 3 days ago. I think the algorithm just looked at like what had the most views, and of course it's the oldest one, and it would just give me a big list of these videos. It had nothing to do with anything up to date or even the same day stuff, and that was just really maddening. So between Google, YouTube, and the news, I just like, where do you go? And it was all social media or directly to people. And so if you're ever in an emergency, look to places like that. If you're going to go to some place like YouTube later, like when I wanted to figure out if certain houses were standing, or if I wanted to figure out which roads I could drive down, I wouldn't go to the news. I would go to YouTube and find the guys who ride around town on the e-bikes with a helmet camera, and you would just see, they would just ride all around the town, and you would just see, okay, this road is really bad, this road's okay. And you would get information that way. Or social media would just tell you, okay, they're closing down the road at 6 p.m. at these checkpoints. Anyway, it's not that the news is bad, it's just outdated. And it's just something to keep in mind when you're in a situation like this. And so we've been camped out here since Tuesday. And it is now Sunday night as I film this video. So we still have no power, obviously, by the fact that I'm sitting here with my battery backup light and my camera batteries. A day or two in, they shut off the gas for safety reasons. The water systems have kind of failed. We do have water, but you cannot drink it, brush your teeth with it, cook with it or do anything. So we have no water, gas, or power. If you're going to be stuck without power for a week, here's some things you want. A nice battery backup system, especially when you have a little fish that needs to have warm water and you need a heater and you don't want your daughter to lose her fish. You definitely need to power that somehow. Helps with some lights, charging phone batteries and stuff. We have little solar panels that charge it. And then there's this. This is an inverter that changes your car battery into AC power, and we use that to charge the battery bank whenever it runs low. To save on power, I took LED bulbs out of this lighting structure because they don't use much power, and that gets us through a much longer night. And if you're careful enough, you can even power your fridge with a battery backup. Some extra bottles of water never hurt. When there's no gas, you need one of these to heat up your food. These have been very useful as well. There's just National Guard now all over the place, and there's a curfew in place. And they've been setting different lines where the National Guard and where the cops are to try to stop looting, because there's been looting in the area. So they've been trying to set up perimeters to kind of patrol for looting. And sometimes they would let us come and go freely, or the perimeter wasn't quite set up yet, so we could go down to the grocery store, you know, get a quick meal to bring up, get some supplies, get some water, stuff like that. But then sometimes you would leave to go get supplies, and then they would set up a perimeter, and then you'd be coming the few blocks back up to the house, and they would just say, no, you can't go back. And you'd say, well, my mother's up there. She doesn't have a car. I got to go up there. And the cops would just say, no, sorry, you cannot, once you cross this line, you cannot cross back. That was a bit tough to deal with. So a lot of neighbors up here just stopped leaving. Right? Or we would find sneaky ways to get around, sneaky paths where they weren't patrolling, or streets that they didn't think of to stop people on. And then we would all have to communicate with each other on text message. Okay, you can take this street, but not that street. Or what would happen on some of the lines, because people did not want to leave their houses, and especially over the line where stuff is burnt, people are really holding down the fort up there, and they do have like National Guard lines. All the big army vehicles are out there. All the soldiers are out there. They're armed, and they will not let you cross that line for any reason. You can say your pet is up there starving to death, and you're not going over that line. So what would happen is they would call neighbors who were still camped out up there, or people who had evacuated, and then you would walk up to the line, and the people who were on the free part of the line would bring supplies, and they would hand them over the ropes. And the National Guard people they were cool, they were friendly about it, but they just had their orders. They had to follow their orders. So they would just hand supplies over the line. So one of the reasons I've been camped out up here all week and not even coming and going anymore is just because I don't know if I leave the house if I can get back in. So we are really just stuck up here in our dark little boxes. But I've really been thankful to have local family and friends. My wife has been staying with friends. My neighbors are friends. But I'm telling you, people have come together in this, and that's another big thing you hear about it. You always see it on the news. This community sticks together. We're going to rebuild. You see all that stuff on the news. It's almost like a cliche. But when you live it, it's very meaningful, and it's very real. A lot of people who would otherwise pass each other and maybe not even wave on the street are really looking out for each other. People are dropping off supplies at the checkpoints or where the National Guard lines are. People are just literally leaving food and water on the streets so you can come down and grab it without crossing the lines, because they know we're up here and we're all protecting our homes or trying to stay put, holding down the fort. We can't leave. So they're kind of supplying us. So that's been really nice. There's also a ton of support, like I said, people calling in, but also because I'm up here and I know so many people up here, there's like 100 different GoFundMes. It's been really amazing to see how quickly those get answered. It's been amazing. When I put up the GoFundMe for my brother-in-law, I've had people that I haven't seen since high school donating. I've had people that I know have no money. Like, they have money, but they don't have like donate a few $100s kind of money, but they're still doing it. And it's just amazing to me watching it happen. I mentioned earlier, I think, that the band Dawes, the Goldsmith brothers and their family all live up here, and Griffin Goldsmith lost his house. Now, because they're kind of public figures, people know the band, and they did really well on Griffin set up a GoFundMe for he and his wife, and they're expecting a new baby. So they had some really overwhelming support, a lot more than they expected. But as soon as he got that, he just started donating to other people. So he donated to my thing, and it was just amazing to me that someone lost their house is donating to my brother-in-law, who, you know, I know Griffin and I know Taylor from Dawes, but they don't know my brother-in-law, you know, but the fact that they still thought to do that was just really moving. But there's just tons of that up here. Tons of that. Tons of churches delivering stuff. Tons of people at the communities. Tons of people from across the country reaching out, sending in stuff. It's just been really, really great. So community and people can be a lot lovelier than you know until you've been through something like this. It also, the opposite also becomes very apparent, is that it only takes a few bad seeds to ruin the whole thing. There's probably only been 20 arrests up here for looters. But man, because there are looters, we have these checkpoints. Because there are looters, I can't leave my house and know I can come back. Because there are looters, I have to sit in a super smoke-filled area with nothing, just to make sure that my livelihood doesn't get taken away. And these looters are dressing up like firefighters, or dressing up like representatives from the gas company. They're being kind of sophisticated about it. They're you know, I'm sure they're making fake IDs so they can try to get through the lines. There aren't tons of them, but it only takes a few. But really, another thing, just the last thing I kind of want to leave with, I think of this quote from one of the Star Wars prequels when the Jedi were talking, and I think one of them says, "Your focus determines your reality," and that's been really noticeably true. There are mornings when I wake up and the house is 48 degrees, you know, and it's cold, and I've got no water, power, or gas, and it's still a mess outside. I got to clean up, and they won't even let me down the street to go to the store. And I know my my brother-in-law's house is dust, and I know all my friends are suffering, and you can get down really, really fast. You can think the world is just a burning pile of shit. But then you get out, you start cleaning up the debris outside, the sun starts to come up, debris starts to clear the air a little bit. You see all the people delivering goods on the streets, you get all the nice messages on the phone, and then you start to say, you know, this stuff happens, but people can be really beautiful, and things will rebuild, and you just start looking at things differently. And it's the same world, it's the same reality, it's just where you're focused. And I'm not suggesting that you ignore bad things or ignore hard things and just, hey, always look at the positive side, you know, because that doesn't work either. I mean, for everyone who's watched this channel, you know, I'm in the life coaching world. I have a coaching practice. I talk to people about this stuff all the time. And there's a lot of people who think positive thinking is the way to go, and it's not. Realistic thinking is the way to go. But you don't want to focus on the negative because it drains you. You want to be aware of it, you want to address it, you want to acknowledge it, but you don't want to dwell because it will drain you. And when it drains you, it makes you unable to do anything about it. You can't help yourself, and you certainly can't help others. And so it's not positive thinking, but it's making sure you keep what's still beautiful in perspective. And when you do that, you get energy, you get stronger, you start solving problems faster, you get focused better, you start reaching out to people, you start seeing what you can do, and you become far more able to make things better. I think as I'm walking away from this, that's the main thing on my mind. That's kind of what I'm leaving with. So if you stuck with me for this video, thanks for listening through. I just kind of wanted to share our story. Right now, we're doing fine. You know, we did put a GoFundMe together for my brother-in-law. You know, it's going okay, but everyone up here can still use help. So if you don't have anyone to help and you want to help, I'll put the link in the description below. So that's it. That's the story from up here. Things can change in a moment. Keep that in mind. Hopefully we get a chance to get back to the fun stuff soon. But for now, let's focus on helping people out here and making things better out there. Till next time, thanks for watching, everyone.